As secluded as an elderly recluse in a cobweb-laced mansion, and as filled with mystery and passion as a forbidding jungle pathway, the Kankakee River forms a sinuous thread binding together the land God forgot to finish. Not alone a river or a drainage system as it wiggles across northwestern Indiana and eastern Illinois, the Kankakee River, since its discovery, has been a contradictory way of life. Its name, according to some authorities, was corrupted from the Potawatomi word Kankakee, which means swampy country. Others say it comes from the Miami word Waikiki, which means wolf country. Following the Kankakee on the map is only the work of minutes, but following the stream on land is another matter. Unlike most rivers, which invite settlement and give man a power for his mills, water for his villages, and transportation for his produce, the Kankakee repelled settlement and prevented expansion. A notoriously rambling stream with 2,000 bends in its 85-mile upper valley, it was a surly, snarling dog holding people at bay, the cantankerous brother among the Hoosier waterways. Man, however, has attempted to subdue it, to change its personality, reform its lazy, slovenly habits, and transform its sullen disposition into one of sunny usefulness. The drama has continued for more than 300 years, and each generation produces a new and often fantastic act. The river has undergone 4 transformations. First, it was the land of the Indian hunter and the French fur trader, then the domain of the frontier farmer. The recreationist and the stock farmer followed, only to be succeeded partially by the reclamationist and the sportsman. Sometimes man has adjusted to the river, other times he has forced the river to adjust to man. The changes have been great, but the Kankakee River has survived them. To understand the Kankakee River, one needs to understand the forces that created it.
I'd like to talk about a most interesting part of the landscape of North America, the Kankakee Valley. The name itself invokes the heritage of the Indians who lived here before the European explorers arrived about 325 years ago. It is believed by some that the name Kankakee means beautiful river. The river was much more than beauty to the Indians. It was cool water. It was shelter. It was the site of a huge amount of wildlife. It was their seasonal home. To really understand the Kankakee Valley, we need to discover the secrets of the Great Ice Age. So please come with me on a journey through time, and let's see how it was that this unique parcel of land was created. During the Great Ice Age, Indiana and Illinois were invaded by glaciers perhaps dozens of times. We really don't know how many, because each time the glaciers came down here, they destroyed all evidence of what had been here before. When a glacier advances and then stops for a while, and then retreats, it leaves behind a long band of hills, which we call an end moraine. On this map, the long brown areas show where the most recent Wisconsin glacier created end moraines in northwest Indiana. On this map, the Valparaiso Moraine is the large brown area south of Lake Michigan, and the Kankakee Valley is the green area south of it. Let's see how these areas came to be. Toward the end of the Ice Age, a large finger or lobe of the huge ice sheet extended south into northern Indiana and into northeastern Illinois. This Lake Michigan lobe dumped the materials that became the Iroquois Moraine to its south and the Kankakee Moraine to its east. The Lake Michigan lobe then melted back, but then advanced again to form the better-known Valparaiso Moraine. Now, during this time, thousands of tons of glacial meltwater were flowing off and away from the glacier. These waters flowed south and west, joined the waters of the Des Plaines River, and in a channel now called the Illinois River, flowed onward to the Mississippi. But these meltwaters were doing more than just flowing through the area we now call the Kankakee Valley. By depositing much of the sand that they carried away from the moraines and off the glacier themselves, they created the huge flat outwash or floodplain with the characteristic sandy soils that are still present today. There are hundreds of sand dunes in the Kankakee Valley. Some are more than 25 feet high. These hills are, or were, great places to find spear and arrowheads, as before settlement they were high and dry locations where for centuries Native Americans had their camps and villages. Here you can see how the Kankakee Valley is hemmed in by the Valparaiso Moraine on the north, the Iroquois Moraine on the south, and the Kankakee Moraine to the east. One more important geologic factor that made the Kankakee Valley so rich was that there was a large layer of limestone over near Momence, Illinois. The new Kankakee River had to flow over this layer of limestone, but the limestone was so high that it blocked the water, much the same way that a dam does on a river today. So the Kankakee Valley was hemmed in on all sides: a hilly, high moraine on the east, the north, and the south, and this limestone layer on the west. This created one of the largest and richest wetlands in North America, perhaps the second largest in the United States. The Kankakee River didn't just flow through this valley, it meandered. It went back and forth like a snake, forming many sloughs and oxbow lakes. The river today, as then, started near South Bend and flowed westward, and after about 250 miles and 2,000 twists and turns, joined the Des Plaines River over near Wilmington, Illinois. Because of the flatness of the river, the Kankakee's water flowed slowly, and as a result, following rainfalls or melting of snow, the river would overflow its banks and flood all the nearby areas. For untold generations, the various tribes of Native Americans hunted and fished in this fine and rich landscape. One of their villages was located at Tassanon, a bit north of what is today Cowes. Then the great French explorer Robert Cavelier de La Salle and his compatriots, 33 men in 8 canoes, paddled down this twisting and turning river in 1679. La Salle's expedition went up the St. Joseph River, portaged near South Bend to the Kankakee River, and then down the Kankakee River into Illinois. One of his men used the nail to post some kind of a notice, and the nail was found in that tree 170 years later. By then, the tree had grown so large that about 170 rings had grown around the nail itself. A few years after that, historian Timothy Ball said, "Of the presence here of La Salle, or some other Frenchman, let us infer that it bears witness."
Since the beginning of life on this planet, the Kankakee Valley was probably the home of animal life, and the many skeletons of mammoth, mastodons, saber-toothed tigers, and the giant beaver unearthed gives evidence of treacherous marshes and quicksand. It was the inexhaustible hunting ground for deer, bear, and mink, for muskrat and raccoons, and for wolves and wolverines until the coming of the waves of trappers and settlers. Indian mounds were once commonplace in all the great Kankakee Valley, grouped in several areas. They have long given the archaeologists and the ethnologists problems of the most intense interest. But with the ruthless leveling of the land, most of these ancient earthworks have gradually disappeared.
I first became interested in doing research on the Kankakee when I came up to Notre Dame in 1992. And I was teaching an archaeological field school, and of course for a field school, you need good sites to work on. In this region of northern Indiana, the Kankakee has the most interesting archaeological sites. What's especially interesting to me about the region is the way that the environment has changed over time and the way people have adapted to it, and especially the role of agriculture and food production in this changing environment. And we can see this in the early woodland period with the first domesticated plants, the middle woodland period when it appears domesticates might have become more important, then the late woodland and upper Mississippian period when corn becomes apparent in the region and very important, and then finally in the historic period as well when the marsh is drained and large-scale agriculture becomes the dominant adaptation to the environment. It's very interesting to see the way people have adapted different parts of the environment as their different ways of life has changed. The last prehistoric culture in the region is called the Upper Mississippian. These people made very finely made shell pottery tempered with shell-tempered pottery, where they mix crushed clam shells in with the pottery. And this is the type of pottery that McAllister described from the site in the 1930s.
Well, we've gathered the clay from a local lake, actually, small lake area, and we added temper to it, which in our case has been sand, very fine temper. And now I'm shaping it. I'll use the top that we've taken off of one of the gourds we grew in the garden to begin the shaping of the pot. Once this sets up a little bit, I'll start to make a coil, which I'll add and continue to add to the top of this. And along the way, I'll take these paddles that we made, and they've been covered with stinging nettle that we gathered and made into cordage, and continue to tap as I work around the pot, which unfortunately I can't do right now because it's too small, until we end up with something along this line. And you can see the marks on the side of the pot from the cordage wrap piece over here, and then some small decorative work. And then hopefully this evening we'll be able to start to fire the pot. And if all goes well, it will turn out. We'll be cooking in it the next day. That's basically what we're doing here. I have some stones that I use for shaping to help, support on the inside as I tap along the outside, and again for helping smooth and shape the inside as I go along. Pretty simple, not a lot of unnecessary items here. That's basically what it is.
These people had a way of life that would be very similar to what's reported for historic Native American groups. Growing corn in small gardens, storing it in pits, probably living in wigwams, and traveling through the environment. The Collier Lodge site where we've worked has an Upper Mississippian occupation at it, and that's what we think the storage pit dates to that we found at the site. They probably didn't live in a village at the site, probably just a small group of several families, what you might call a hamlet, just a small summer agricultural camp. But the Collier Lodge site, before it was known as Baum's Bridge, was known as Potawatomi Ford, an area where Native Americans were able to cross the river. We don't know which tribe the Upper Mississippian people of our area would evolve into, if anyone. We just don't have any connections or sites that allow us to connect the Upper Mississippian material, which is called Fisher and Huber, with the historic Native American tribes. Although there have been many theories that do that, many of them are incompatible. So it's still something that we're hoping to learn more about as time goes on. In this region, the historic period begins in 1679, when the French explorer La Salle went down the Kankakee River, crossing right by the Collier Lodge site and perhaps, who knows, even camping at it. It would be very exciting if we find an artifact from the late 1600s at the Collier Lodge site. But after that, there's very little evidence or information about what's going on in the region until we get up to the period of the 1800s, when Native Americans were being forced out of the area and the Euro-American settlers or first pioneers were moving into it. And this is a period between 1795 and 1840, the very end of this, that's one of the best documented early historic periods in the region. From the Native American perspective, you could call this the removal period, time when they were being removed from the region. This was a time period when Native Americans were adapting to a rapidly changing lifestyle, the disappearance of the fur trade, and an influx of settlers. The settlers brought many economic opportunities, but they also increased pressure on game and competed for ideal agricultural lands. Over time, Native Americans developed many different strategies to try to resist removal. Some were in favor of removal and left. Some were not and tried to resist it, some successfully, some not. And this research into the different strategies that Native Americans used and how they used them, which were successful and which were not, is one part of our research at the Collier Lodge site and in the Kankakee region. And the Collier Lodge site is interesting because it appears it was occupied by Native Americans who were not successful in resisting removal. They no longer live in this area. And this is a great contrast to work we've done at other sites, such as the Pokagon Village near Niles, Michigan, or the Bannock Village site in Marshall County, Indiana, where we do have people that were successful in resisting removal. And by looking at these different types of sites, we can get a better idea of the economic conditions and other things that may have led people to be successful in their efforts or not successful.
When the glaciers dug the basins that formed the Great Lakes, they had, at the same time, dug the Kankakee Valley. Originally, the Kankakee was a vast network of rivers spread over a large part of Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois, but the geological process of river robbing, presumably in the Pleistocene age, evidently reduced the area of the Kankakee to its present confines. Over this river came many of the first explorers and the Jesuit and Franciscan missionaries. Here Dablon, Eloise, and Marquette, LaSalle, Hennepin, and Tonty, and a long list of others paddled their canoes to the Mississippi. With the final westward movement of the remnant of the Mohicans to the hidden recesses of the river came the new name, the Kankakee. Here the Mohicans found many packs of wolves frequenting the edges of the valley because of the abundance of deer. So they called it Wolfland River, which was Kankakee in their language. As treaties were made and the Indians moved westward, there came into the Kankakee Valley the pioneers and the homeseekers, and with them the usual contingent of lawless characters. This gentry found an almost inaccessible group of forest-covered islands in the river, a perfect rendezvous, and for half a century the most desperate fugitives and lawbreakers of the new nation lived on these islands, safe from the puny arms of frontier law. From these island hideouts the desperadoes ranged far and wide, murdering and pillaging, passing Kankakee-made counterfeit money, and stealing horses. Momence was the border town for the Wild West element for a period of 50 years. There the lawbreakers held sway and emerged periodically to ravage some distant settlement or to murder some prosperous-looking traveler. As long as the local citizens and all the numerous Kankakee towns of the day kept their mouths closed, there was an unwritten law that their property would remain unmolested. Long before the departure of the Indians, many French-Canadian voyageurs, woodsmen, and corps de bois deserted from the various expeditions and went into the better agricultural sections of the valley, where they took unto themselves Indian wives and raised broods of children. There they practiced the agriculture they had known in France, and there they established settlements that still exist, with their French-Canadian names. And there are vague hints of an early Indian ancestry. Some of the village cures can, if they will, tell of a settlement history that goes back to 1763. In the early days, there was another distinctive breed of man along the Kankakee, the trapper. They were usually men of hermit-like tendencies. As their numbers grew, they set up among themselves a plat of trapping rights all along the river, and each, and with his own squatter possessions, took thousands of dollars, perhaps millions of dollars, as a whole group worth of beaver, mink, muskrat, and various other fur-bearing animals from the Kankakee swamps each year. This area was for 50 years or more the trapper's paradise, and finally, before the drainage of the millions of acres of marshland, it became a like paradise for the wealthy sportsmen, who came in great numbers each season to shoot the migrating fowl. To retain the swamplands as a private hunting ground, they bought up trappers' rights all along the river and built almost palatial hunting lodges and clubhouses. For many years, the names of many of the great and near great appeared on those clubhouse registers.
We're here in front of what once was the Diana Club. One of the very popular hunting and fishing clubs was in the Kankakee Valley. This one is on the south side of the Kankakee, just south of across the river from Water Valley or Shelby, and just north of Thayer, the little village of Thayer. The little porch here is very different from what I remember in the 20s, because I remember a huge wraparound decorative porch that went all the way around the front of this building. The building was popular for people to come down for weekends just to get away, and also to hunt and fish. They would come from different directions on the railroad, because at Shelby you could come from the east or west or north and south. But the very well built building was they have a starting around 1900, replaced one that burned. A lot of old homes, a lot of buildings burned back there because they had wood shingles and they caught on fire a lot. My father, who was born in 1874, often told me about the Diana Club down by Shelby and down by Thayer.
The Kankakee crossing, known as Pottawatomie Ford in Porter County, has seen much history enacted, some of which is not history, but deduction and surmise. Compared with the glacial moraines and with boulders brought by the Ice Age, the known period of its history is but a few seconds in glacial time, but to today's readers, it covers a span of almost 400 years. From time immemorial, Indians coming and going from the interior to Lake Michigan had worn a hard-packed path, about 18 inches wide and 10 inches deep, across the prairie's sod. The trail following the ridges was an all-weather route to the best fording place on the river. Missionaries from Quebec and Montreal, from Mackinac and St. Ignace also paused at this inviting landing place on both sides of the ford as they came down the Kankakee, and subsequently soldiers from France, Spain, and England, and later American soldiers found this a resting place for canoe travelers or crossing for foot travelers. In the course of time, a ferry was established there, and later log bridges, known as Eaton's Bridge or Balm's Bridge, were built, and eventually came the steel bridge built by the counties of Porter and Jasper. Trappers and traders in early days used the Pottawatomie Ford site as a mooring place for their canoes, and as they came to trade with the Indians. The area once known as a skinning place for the Indian deer hunters, and every steam shovel straightening their river or ditches dug up numerous bones of deer and bear and wolves. In 1878, a new day dawned for the Balms Bridge area. A group of sportsmen from Louisville, Kentucky, who had been frequent visitors to the area, formed a hunting club and erected a clubhouse near the bridge. It was known as Louisville Gun Club and had as its caretaker Parker, endearingly known as Doc Rice of Hebron. Rice and Aaron Furman, also of Hebron, were the guides. In 1879, a group of sportsmen from the Pittsburgh vicinity built a clubhouse not far from the bridge and named it the Pittsburgh Gun Club. Shortly after completion of the building, they brought in a small steamer or steam launch named Little Rhoda. It was used as passenger service for the most part. That same year, another clubhouse came into being near the bridge. A group, about whom little is known, erected this lodge, calling it the White House Hunting Club. In some accounts, the name appears as the Valley Gun Club, but it must be presumed that both names refer to the same clubhouse. Also in 1879, the Rockville, Terre Haute, and Indianapolis Gun Club was built, a large two-story building with basement and a veranda on three sides. It fronted on the river with a number of wooden steps leading to the water. A narrow pier ran the length of the front. At any given time, several of the familiar Kankakee boats could be attached to the pier, the property of the members. The Kankakee River boat was a uniquely designed craft, a special pattern suited to the marshes, puffer brush, and other conditions encountered while duck and goose hunting along the river. Most were locally built. The early years of the 20th century witnessed the passing of most of the hunting lodges. The dredges were approaching from upriver, shadowing the end of an era. An ominous figure with a long beard and leaning on his scythe was also entering the scene, a long bony finger pointing to the eclipse of a golden age. The members of the various gun clubs were aging and bidding goodbye to the marshes. The clubs were not attracting new members in the shadow of the swinging dredge booms. A surviving landmark of former times is the historic Collier Lodge. Built in 1898, purchased in 1904 by Flora Collier and managed with her husband Elwood. The building served as a hunter's boarding house during the sportsman's heyday. Colliers also carried general goods, bait, and other necessities for fishing and hunting. Sundays at the Colliers were known for tables set with fine china and laden with good food. Dinner guests came from all walks of life. Local folks could enjoy the luxuries of the wealthy for an afternoon. While the years brought changes to the area, and the straightening of the river declined to the economy, the trappers, fishermen, and sportsmen trade, and the hunting lodges, Elwood and Flora Collier had the good business sense to adapt the use of their building to the changing needs. Collier's General Store expanded its goods, creating a trading place for local farmers and retained rooms for rent. With the passing of Flora Collier in 1925, Elwood in 1943, Their son Jim Collier continued to run business until his death in 1952. In 2001, the Kankakee Valley Historical Society took ownership of the building. Having seen a progression of owners, a period of vacancy, and worn by the elements, the building was in disrepair. The Kankakee Valley Historical Society has taken on the project of restoring the historic Collier's Lodge.
I am Dean Illingworth. I'm an architect, grew up in Lafayette, Indiana. My experience in architecture around the state has been, in a large portion over my career, in restoration. I've done courthouse restoration in Rochester and in Lafayette, in Greensburg, Indiana. Done work on the Soldier Sailors Monument in Indianapolis. A number of opportunities like that. So I offered to help John through the process, and as John formed the Kankakee Valley Historical Society, have been involved through that process. First impression, there is a vast amount of disrepair due to the water environment, due to the termite, due to just lack of maintenance over many, many years. The condition of the lodge, as you can see from the photographs and videotapes that the Society have put together, recognizes that state of disrepair. But yet the materials, some of the materials are there. Even in disrepair, they show the quality of the original lodge, and that was a very rich quality. Plaster walls, wood beadboard wainscoting. The front portion of the house had a beadboard ceiling, second roof ceiling, things that you would not necessarily see now, but you might see them in a hunting lodge or some kind of community or public building. A little bit higher quality, so forth. The foundation, of course, as crawled through it, still shows some of the original wood piers in the center of the house. Around the perimeter of the lodge, the foundation has been replaced with a concrete block, which also recognizes the fact that somebody at some point has done some maintenance on the facility. As we go up the steps from the porch to the second floor level and walk into the facility, the disrepair even more because of the amount of water that had come to the roof over the years. As we think about the restoration of the lodge, realizing the deterioration that has taken place, it will be a major, and that is with a lodge that comes back together to look very, very similar to what it did originally look like, but with the modern amenities of power, lighting, computer capability, cooling, all those kinds of things that you would expect to have in a meeting room or expect to have in a nice quality museum where you have artifacts that you're trying to stabilize and maintain over a period of time.
The Kankakee River Valley has a history that goes back over 10,000 years. It is a multifaceted story beginning with the geological formation of the valley. The Native Americans discovered its rich and abundant natural resources. Later, white men moved in, removing the Native Americans further west. Then came the era of the trappers and hunters. Soon the rich and famous arrived, built clubhouses, and enjoyed the bountiful hunting. Next came the land speculators who bought up as much marshland as possible to sell at great profit to farmers who were seeking new land to break and cultivate. The dredges arrived and changed the face of the Kankakee River Valley. Finally, those who worked towards restoring land along the newly ditched Kankakee into areas that are more compatible and beneficial to the environment and wildlife. The Kankakee Valley Historical Society works to recover the stories from the past and contribute to the future of the Kankakee River Valley, preserving the rich and diverse history for this and future generations.